There are places that look ordinary on the outside, schools, homes, jobs, even communities, but beneath the surface, they operate like slow-acting poisons. Not against the body, against the self. They silence something essential, your inner voice. Carl Jung didn't use the phrase inner voice casually. To him, it was a signal from the unconscious, a quiet messenger of truth, warning you when you were betraying your own soul. But in certain environments, that voice doesn't just go unheard, it gets buried. These are the dangerous spaces Jung warned us about, environments that force you to trade your authenticity for acceptance, that reward masks over honesty, that replace your instincts with noise, pressure, and pretense. They don't shout at you to stop being yourself, they quietly make it unbearable to continue. Jung believed that losing connection to your inner voice was one of the most serious spiritual wounds a person could suffer, because once that voice fades, you're no longer living from within, you're just performing, surviving, existing. In this video, we'll uncover 4 specific environments Jung implicitly warned us about, not physical locations, but psychological terrains. Places that condition you to suppress who you are. Places that reward silence over truth. Places that teach you how to disappear in plain sight. And it starts with the most deceptive one of all, the one that demands you fit in or be left out. This is the first place Carl Jung warned us about, environments that demand total conformity, spaces where being yourself isn't just discouraged, it's inconvenient for everyone else. You've felt it before, haven't you? That pressure to adjust your tone, change your beliefs, hide your opinions, just to keep the peace. It can be a corporate office where ambition matters more than integrity, a family where tradition smothers individuality, a classroom where curiosity is punished and obedience is praised. From the outside, it all looks normal, but inside, you're shrinking. Jung believed the path to wholeness was individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself. But that process threatens systems that thrive on sameness. When you start thinking differently, they label it as rebellion. When you speak up, you're too much. So you learn to dim your light. You tell yourself it's safer that way, and eventually your inner voice isn't just ignored, it becomes something you're afraid to listen to. Ask yourself this: how many times have you stayed silent in a meeting, even when your gut told you to speak? How often have you nodded along with friends or co-workers just to avoid tension, knowing deep down you disagreed? And how long can you keep doing that before your silence becomes a habit you can't break? Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but privilege comes with risk." In conformist spaces, authenticity is expensive. Sometimes it costs you a promotion, sometimes a relationship, sometimes your place in the group. But what's the real cost of betraying yourself? What do you lose when you belong everywhere, except to yourself? You see, the danger isn't just that these places ask you to blend in, it's that over time, you forget what it felt like to stand out. And when that happens, the next place becomes even harder to escape, the place where disagreement isn't allowed, not just punished, not even permitted. This is a place where disagreement is treated as betrayal. In these spaces, the unspoken rule is simple: don't rock the boat. And if you do, prepare to be punished, not always with direct confrontation, but with cold silence, quiet resentment, or subtle exclusion. These aren't just hostile environments, they're emotionally manipulative ones. The moment you express a different opinion, you're suddenly the problem. Think about it. Have you ever been in a relationship where voicing your needs turned into an argument? Where honesty felt like walking into a trap? Or maybe in a group of friends where everyone agrees on everything, until you say something different, and then the room changes. Jung once said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power." But many relationships, romantic, professional, even spiritual, aren't built on love. They're built on control. And in those spaces, disagreement isn't conversation, it's rebellion. Your voice becomes a threat, not a contribution. What makes this space so dangerous is that over time you begin to doubt your own perception. You stop speaking, not because you agree, but because you don't want to deal with the aftermath. You rehearse your thoughts in your mind, but never say them out loud. Eventually, silence becomes your survival strategy. But here's the problem. Silence might keep you safe on the outside, but it creates chaos on the inside. Suppressed truth doesn't disappear, it festers, and the longer you stay in a space that punishes honesty, the harder it becomes to even recognize your own truth when you feel it. So ask yourself, who do you feel like you have to lie to just to be loved? Who have you trained yourself to agree with, even when every part of you screams no? Because once you stop trusting your right to disagree, the next trap becomes even easier to fall into. A place that doesn't punish disagreement directly, but distracts you so much you forget you had something to say in the first place. This third environment Carl Jung cautioned us about is more subtle, but just as destructive. The space of constant distraction. It doesn't silence your inner voice by force or fear. It does it by drowning it in noise. We live in a world where being busy is worn like a badge of honor, where the moment you wake up, you're met with pings, updates, breaking news, endless scrolling. And when the noise outside gets too loud, the voice inside gets quiet. Not because it has nothing to say, but because you've forgotten how to listen. Jung believed that reflection, stillness, and time alone with your unconscious were necessary for real growth. He said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." But today, looking inside is something many of us actively avoid because it's uncomfortable. It's slow, and it doesn't give you dopamine like a new notification or a viral clip does. Think about how often you turn to your phone the second there's silence. How often you fill your schedule just to avoid being alone with your own thoughts. Even rest has become performative, always tied to content, to productivity, to optimization. You don't just read a book anymore. You track it. You don't take a walk. You record it. You don't feel bored. You fix it. But your inner voice speaks in quiet moments. It doesn't shout over your playlist or fight your to-do list. It waits for stillness. And in a world that rewards overstimulation, that stillness becomes a radical act. So ask yourself, when was the last time you sat in silence, no phone, no task, no agenda, just to hear your own thoughts? Do you even remember what your voice sounds like beneath the noise? Because if you never create space to listen to yourself, you become vulnerable to whatever the world decides to tell you. You become programmable, predictable, lost in a current that doesn't care where you end up. And that loss of inner presence leads straight into the final and perhaps most deceptive space of all, the one that wears a smile while asking you to bury your truth. This is a place where only positive emotions are allowed, and anything deeper, darker, or more honest is seen as a threat. In this environment, you're not told to be authentic, you're told to be pleasant, you're encouraged to smile, to stay grateful, to vibe high, even when your world is falling apart. Pain is treated like a failure. Anger makes you toxic. Sadness makes others uncomfortable. So, instead of expressing what's real, you start editing yourself, emotionally filtering every thought just to keep up the illusion of being okay. This can show up in workplaces that praise good energy while ignoring burnout. It's found in relationships where you're only loved when you're easy to deal with. And it's deeply embedded in certain corners of wellness culture where positivity is used like a weapon, something to silence your struggle rather than support your healing. But Carl Jung understood that true wholeness means integrating every part of the self, not just the light, but the shadow too. He said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, pretending to be okay doesn't make you whole, it makes you hollow. And the danger here is that the more you suppress difficult emotions, the more disconnected you become from your inner voice. Because that voice doesn't only speak in peace and joy. Sometimes it screams through anxiety. Sometimes it trembles in grief. Sometimes it whispers through anger, not to destroy, but to wake you up. So ask yourself, Where in your life are you only allowed to show the highlight reel? Where have you been taught that being real is less important than being likable? And how many times have you told yourself, "I'm fine," just because you didn't think anyone would stay if you weren't? Because the truth is, when you're only allowed to show one side of your humanity, you lose access to the full depth of your being. And when that happens, the inner voice that once guided you becomes something you're trained to ignore. But the good news, that voice is never truly gone, only buried. Because reconnecting with your inner voice isn't about running away from the world, it's about finding your way back to yourself within it. Every time you feel the urge to shrink, to stay quiet, or to pretend everything's fine when it isn't, that's your signal. That's the whisper trying to reach you. Carl Jung believed the greatest journey a person could take was inward, not toward perfection, but toward integration. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become that if you're constantly censoring your truth to fit into environments that never really saw you to begin with? We've explored 4 psychological spaces Jung warned would silence that voice. Places that demand conformity, places that punish disagreement, places that distract you from yourself, and places that reject anything but forced positivity. You may be walking through one of these right now. You might even be surviving all 4, but the fact that you're still listening, that something in you resonated, that means your voice isn't gone. It's just been waiting for you to stop apologizing for it, waiting for you to remember that authenticity is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. So start small. Speak your truth in safe places. Sit in silence. Feel what's real. Question the roles you've been handed. Give your intuition room to breathe again. And ask yourself, what would your life look like if you stopped silencing the part of you that always knew? Because that voice, it's not just your compass, it is your core. And it's time you heard it clearly. So if this message found you at the right moment, don't let it stop here. Share in the comments, which of these 4 places have you spent the most time in? Which one are you finally ready to leave behind? And if you found something in this that stirred something deeper, subscribe for more. Each week, we uncover forgotten wisdom, raw truth, and the quiet revolutions happening inside all of us. Because when you reclaim your inner voice, you don't just change your life, you rewrite the story you were told to live. You were told to live.